Hey, folks, welcome to the podcast. This, of course, being the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode 424. Matthew and I holding down the fort today. Jacob's got other things he's attending to. And so, in fact, kind of excited. Well, we won't talk about it today, what some of that is, but I'm excited to actually make mention of a new development here at company headquarters here in the near future. Probably not what anybody would expect. So, but when it's appropriate to do so, I'll probably say something. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Hey, Tris, what's up, dude? Randy,
cool.
Good morning. Morning,
Hey guys.
Where are you, Randy? Hawaii? Well, I guess actually, okay. So if you're on Pacific time, I guess it's still morning for like 17 more minutes.
Yeah, officially, yeah.
Let's see.
I got chewed up by a first sergeant one time for saying good afternoon. It was like 11:40 or something. So,
and you've probably been on shift since like 5 or 6 a.m.
Right,
so
right,
it feels like afternoon by that point.
Right. I'm with you, Randy.
Hello, Chrissy, Sean, Tony, Ben. Thank you for being here. And Randy again. Yeah. The OC. Yeah. Mac, thanks for joining. Guys, today's going to be a fun episode. And a little bit of a clickbait-ish title, Gunfight Hit Factor. And then I decided, Matthew, I added a subtitle, Processes and Results. So it'll be an interesting conversation here today.
I like it.
Some people probably like hit factor. What? Some of you are like, what? For a different reason, like competition stuff in a gunfight. Won't that get you killed on the streets? The answer to your question, Sean, on YouTube is no. Are we going to start shipping concealed carry branded root beer? And I'm not drinking root. I'm drinking water. Okay. Trying to be healthier and lose some pounds. I haven't had a root beer in a few days. Dave on YouTube. Hey, buddy. Thanks for being here. It is a beautiful day in Colorado. It's going to be a little bit warmer today than I think it was yesterday. Not complaining, but yesterday was an amazing day here. It was like, maybe it hit 80 degrees, maybe. I think it was more like 78, 79, at least where I was. And very, very delightful. Then tomorrow I think is a bit warmer and just, yeah, here comes the heat. Right. Hey, this Matthew guy, thanks for joining. Hey, Mark. Well, guys, so let's kick off the recorded portion of today's show, the audio. And Randy, 95 here. Yeah, I'll bet. So let's do it. Matthew, give us a nice rhythmic, you understand the term rhythmic, right?
Yes, I do.
Give us a nice rhythmic 3, 2, 1.
All right. We're starting in 3, 2, 1.
This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode 424. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network. I am your host, Riley Bowman, and joined today by Matthew Maruster. Again.
I'm here again. You're stuck.
People probably getting tired of you.
I wouldn't doubt it. I get tired of myself. Actually,
I haven't seen a single comment yet. Where's Jacob? Bring Jacob back. Yeah, we just keep, we're retiring Jacob from the show.
Yeah. No, we're not.
Just starting
fake news
over here.
It's fake news.
Just just a lot going on, and some really good stuff happening down at the office/warehouse today. That's where Jacob is today, and it's probably not the best day for him to try to hop on a podcast. So you got the two of us, and here we are talking about gunfight hit factor. We'll explain what we mean by that, and talking about how we increase that hit factor, right? And we'll spend some time talking about processes and results, because I think this is a very interesting approach to defensive shooting, and it's kind of borrowing from some things in the competition world. So we'll get into that. Some of you may disagree with some of what we say today. That's okay. Disagreement is a-okay. Being jerks is not. And so we're gonna hit this topic today. But first, though, today's episode is brought to you and sponsored by, and actually they are an official podcast sponsor, Mantis X. MantisX.com is where you can check them out. Many of you are probably familiar with the product. I still got my original Mantis X, the original version 1 model from a couple years back. Still use it, and I'll tell you, I've learned a lot about how I shoot a gun, how I manipulate a trigger, and things from the feedback that Mantis X has provided me. And Matthew, have you used Mantis X?
Yeah, I had the original one, and now I have the X10, which is it's I mean, it's all the stuff that when I had the original one, I was like, man, I wonder if it could do this. And you're like thinking, oh, that's some sort of like futuristic type stuff. But the stuff that the new X10 can do, as far as like giving you readout on muzzle rise and in recovery times and stuff, it's phenomenal.
And I haven't even been able to play with that part of it, the X10 in particular, that much. I've played with it a little bit. I don't have a personal model. We've got one down at the office that I can use. I keep meaning to take it to the range with me and get a little more familiar with it. But that stuff is really fascinating to me. And there's way more data available in the X10 than I actually thought there was. And the more I learn about it, I'm like, oh, wow, like that's really, really, really cool. Now, the original model has been basically phased out now at this point. I think there's still a little bit of remaining stock available, but once it's gone, it's gone. And then the new flagship model will be the X3 model. Mm-hmm. And so, check out the Mantis X. You can go to mantisx.com, like I said. And now here's the deal. For podcast listeners, you're going to get 10% off if you use a coupon code CCP10, CCP10. So save 10% just by being a listener of the Concealed Carry podcast, and go to mantisx.com. Today's episode also brought to you by the Concealed Carry Gun Tools app, Reciprocity Map Builder tool. So I've got my app here. I'm going to load it up. And we were talking about this the other day, actually, with the gun business directory, or the gun business finder map, tool thing. Really, really cool tool. Well, if we go to the maps tab and then go within that to the reciprocity tab, you can generate your own custom reciprocity map based on a variety. Now, I know on the camera, for those of you viewing, it doesn't show it super great because of the lighting and everything that I've got here in the office. But I've got multiple permits, and I think it's just super handy. Like, what I do is you create an account on the app, and you plug in there your permit information, right? So I got this permit, I got that permit. Here's my expiration dates. You're going to get a reminder when you're getting close to your expiration. I think it's supposed to prompt you around either 90 days or 120 days out, which is oftentimes the renewal kind of time frame. Like here in Colorado, we can start, I think, a renewal 120 days before it expires. And it can take up to 90 days to process. Usually doesn't, but it can. And so, but here's the thing. You got all those permits, and you've got them plugged into your account and the app. You just go in there and you just tap the little button here, use my CCW info, and it's just going to pull right from the permits you have plugged into the app and generate your custom reciprocity map, showing exactly what states have reciprocity and which ones don't for you. Hugely valuable tool, built right in there within the Concealed Carry Gun Tools app. Use the link concealedcarry.com/mobile app as a short link to get there. It'll prompt you to download the app in either Android or Apple device form.
Mm-hmm. And it's constantly updated. And I know there's other apps out there that do reciprocity maps. But the app, our reciprocity map in that is built into such a robust gun tools more than just one. So, I mean, you get a lot in that map. And one of the things is I don't know the support on some of the other. I've looked at some of the other ones just because I'm curious when people say, there's other apps and stuff, to see if they get updated and stuff. I don't know. I don't follow that, but I know ours gets updated regularly. So
that's right. And the question actually in the Facebook comments here from Ben: how do we add a business to the gun-friendly map? So I think on our website, there's a link to be able to request to add a business to the directory, but you can also just email support@concealedcarry.com and send your information of whatever business it is. That's also true of gun-free zones. So we will add those to the database if there's a gun-free zone or a gun business that you'd like to make sure people know about. Send an email to support@concealedcarry.com. That'll be one way to handle that for sure. That'll just come to our support team here, and we'll get it taken care of. So good question. So yeah, thanks guys for supporting our sponsors and making this podcast possible and everything we do here. Let's get into the topic, Matthew. So gunfight hit factor. Let me kind of explain a couple things and sort of set the stage or the context for this conversation we're about to have. The phrase hit factor comes from particularly IPSC and USPSA competition shooting. Right. IPSC was founded way back in the 70s. USPSA was in the late 80s or, I think somewhere around, no. Anyway, something like that. I should go check up on or brush up on my USPSA history. But in that style of shooting, you finish based on like your final, finish place or ranking or whatever at a match is entirely based on hit factor. What is hit factor? Well, you take your time that you shot the stages in, right? So, it took me 15 seconds, or actually, let's use a really nice round number. Let's say 10 seconds, because 10 is really easy to compute off of, right? So let's say you shoot a stage in 10 seconds. And there are some stages that are very, very short and very quick and fast. So a 10-second stage, and you've got, let's say, 6 targets, okay? But each target, in order to be considered neutralized, if you will, has to be shot twice. And so you shoot each of those 6 targets twice. Each target is worth a max of 5 points. Every hit on each target is worth 5 points, a max of 10 points per target. If you had a steel target, though, it would be a 5-point target, right? So for however many hits it takes on a target. But let's just say we have 6 paper targets, 2 shots each, 5 points each, max points, right? And so you have 12 times 5 for all the points. That's 60 points. Right, assuming you got good hits, right? A-zone hits. 60 points divided by 10 seconds. That's the time it took you to get those 60 points. And what do you get? 60 divided by 10. Matthew, I'm putting you on the spot.
What do you get?
Can jarheads do math?
Was it 0.6? No. 1. 60.
60 divided by 10.
60 divided by 10. 6. Sorry. I thought you said 6 divided by 10. 60 divided by 10 is 6.
Oh boy. So for the record, Marines don't do math well.
I did. Just teasing. I can count on my fingers.
60 divided by 10. So 60 points divided by 10 seconds. Hit factor of 6, right? But let's say somebody got it done in 5 seconds. Now, this would be like me shooting a stage in 10 seconds, right? And then Max Michel doing it. Let's just say Max Michel did it in 6 seconds, okay? Because that makes it really easy again. So then we divide, say, 60 points for Max Michel by 6 seconds, and what we get? Hit factor of 10, right? So that hit factor would be 4 points higher than mine, let's say. Okay? So that would be hit factor. Now, what is that? A division of points by time is quite literally points per time, per second. Points per second. So why is this relevant? Well, I was thinking about this recently and the other evening, and I was just thinking about it in this manner. And I was thinking about how points per second in a gunfight is very much a thing. Now, the points might be a little bit ambiguous, right? because really the objective in a gunfight is must stop threat, must neutralize threat. And we don't know how many shots it will take necessarily to for sure stop that threat, because in some gunfights, it might be one shot. In others, it might be 10 shots, like the recent experience that BJ Baldwin had in that In-N-Out Burger shooting that we talked about recently. Right. So we don't know exactly the course of fire. We don't know the stage layout. We don't know the number of shots required for the so-called gunfight stage. But that's actually irrelevant, because what is important is that a high hit factor, or the higher we can get our so-called hit factor, the better we're going to be. If our hit factor in a gunfight with a threat, with a bad guy or bad gal, a bad dude, if our hit factor is higher than theirs, we win pretty much every time. Agreed?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in a competition, things are controlled, so you know what you're getting into, you know what the metrics are and what you need to qualify or whatnot, right? In a deadly force shooting, you don't know and you can't control everything. So yeah, we're trying to give ourselves the best chance, the best odds, right? Because we can't get the odds to 100% survival like we can, in a competition. So we're just trying to do everything we can to get that odds of surviving this the highest, and through looking at video and watching video. And I know John Correa and you did a whole segment on, typically the person who starts landing accurate hits, or their hit factor is good quickly on the other guy, is typically the person who survives or who ends up dominating the gunfight or kind of dictating how it's going to end. So yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So with this premise or this logic in mind, here's the thing. Okay, so again, we it's not like a competition stage where, again, we know ahead of time. In fact, I'm shooting a match tomorrow, and I've got, I had them right here. I must have, I put them over there in my range bag. I've got printed out for the Wyoming Sectional USPSA Championship, which is tomorrow. Well, it's tomorrow and Saturday, but I'm shooting it tomorrow. Worked out with my schedule better, and I think they were actually out of spots for Saturday. So shooting that tomorrow. There's 7 stages. I know what all the stages are in advance. They send it out to shooters, so I can look at that and go, okay, all right, kind of have a sense of what I'm going to do, right? Know how many targets there are, know how many shots there will be, how many points are up for grabs. And then, when I see the stages, I doubt I'm going to get up there in time to see them tonight, so I'll have to try to get there early tomorrow, and I'll do a quick walkthrough and go, okay, cool, all right, now I know what I need to do, right? In real life gunfight, we don't get that advantage of knowing ahead of time. But I'm going to make a little correlation here that wherever we go, environmentally, like our environment that we find ourselves in, we can be aware enough of that environment that it's kind of like the stage layout, right? So you look at USPSA Ep6 style stages or IDPA or whatever, and you got, like different walls or barrels or, just various things that are placed in the way to make it interesting, right? To create these walls, these obstacles, these shooting boundaries. It's an environment that you have to operate within. Well, we find ourselves, whether it's at home, at work, at a restaurant, at the gas station, we're in all these various unique environments. And a part of, I think so often we talk about like so-called situational awareness, and people think, well, I'm going to pay attention to where all the bad guys are. But it is obviously way more broad than that. It's about everything. It's about knowing where you are, the environment that you're in, what resources and tools are available to you in that environment, right? And then who are the actors in that environment? Who's around me? What's going on? Paying attention to little cues, subtle hints, whatever it is, right? That would be, looking at a situation more holistically in terms of being aware. And that environment, that's your shooting stage. You've got walls, you got columns, you got gas pumps, you got tables, you got chairs, you got whatever stuff in this environment, some of which might be a hindrance to you, some of which might be your best friend as you use it for cover, right? And then the course of fire is threat, stop threat as soon as possible. Well, how do we accomplish it as soon as possible? Well, first of all, we want to shoot at a high level performance to where we can get good hits in a short amount of time on that target. And we don't want to have any misses, because guess what? Every single miss or every ineffective shot, because guess what? Hitting somebody on the periphery is not an effective shot, right? We need stuff in kind of that high center, chest, center mass, head, those critical areas that are going to bring a stop to the threat as soon as possible. And that's a high hit factor. That's actually one of the things I appreciate about USPSA shooting, is it penalizes, especially for minor scoring. I won't go into the specifics between minor and major factor scoring numbers, but in I shoot 9mm, I'm shooting minor scoring, and if I hit it in the D zone on a USPSA target, it's only worth 1 point. So I hit in the periphery on the body. Well, it's not that it's worth nothing, but it's not worth a lot, right? Hit him in the center chest, 5 points. Hit him twice, boom, 10 points. That's a lot more effective. Anyway, my point is that your course of fire is stop threat as soon as possible with no misses, because misses represent more time it takes for you. Every miss costs you time, right? That's one more shot away from accomplishing the objective. Plus, in the real world, there's penalties for a miss potentially. And big time penalties. It's not like hitting a no shoot in a match, and not only do you get docked the point you missed on shooting the target you were supposed to shoot, but you get penalized 10 additional points. In the real world, you might get penalized $3 million for a lawsuit, right? And having to live with the guilt of my missed shot killed somebody else or hurt them severely, right? So I'm going on and on. Like like my brain would I could just dump on you right now with all these thoughts. But let's bring it back to kind of the premise of today's episode. And I want to get your thoughts on kind of some of this other stuff that I've thrown at you. Is I want to achieve as high of a hit factor, points per second, good effective hits on target, good meaty bits of the body, in as less time as possible, and that equates to a high hit factor. That's the goal. Yeah.
I think the next question. Well, before I ask that question, I know there's probably going to be people that are listening and saying, "Well, competition shooting is totally different than self-defense, and it's not a game." And I mean, I know all the kind of arguments for that, because if I'm being honest, I initially didn't really see I was kind of in that camp. I wasn't so dogmatic, but I was sort of in the camp of, let's not try to put point values on shooting, because, it almost becomes a game. And that was kind of almost, I wasn't so dogmatic as some people, but I know if you're listening and you're kind of along that line or in that camp. But here's what I would say, kind of change my mind on this is that, like, how do you quantify hit factor, right? If you're not doing any sort of metric or any sort of either a drill or a stage or timed event or anything like that. How can you quantify that? Because I think we all would agree getting quick shots, accurate shots, effective shots quickly on the target in the least amount of time is perfect, and that's what our goal is, and that's the description or definition of hit factor. So we know it's important. How do we quantify it? And if you're not using a timer, if you're not doing some sort of repeatable thing where you can see progression or maybe, a dissolving of your skills, then you really don't know where you stand, and you don't know if you're getting better or worse. You don't know how to quantify your skills.
That's right. So here's a question for you, and you're on a great like trajectory here in terms of thought process. Most shooters go to the range, they shoot, they practice, and they get points, right? When they shoot from they see their points, they see their hits, and that's measured there's a couple of ways we could measure that, right? So if we're shooting, say, like a B8 bullseye style target, an NRA B8 target, we have an X ring, 10 ring, 9 ring, 8 ring, 7 ring, and so forth. And so obviously in the dead center and the 10, including the 10 ring, worth 10 points every shot, right? And as we get further and further away from the center, which is our goal, is to hit the center, then we start losing points. So that would be one way, is that it's straight up like some kind of what's the word? Progression or there's a word that's like anyway, it's just a proportional. There we go. Proportional calculation of points based on how far from center, right? Another way would be that it's a go, no go, right? Like it's a pass fail. So I shot Jack Wilson drill or Jack Wilson test. I'm starting to call it Jack Wilson test because it's to me, it's like it's one shot. It's not much of a drill, really. It really is like a test. Like that's how I approach it. I go to the range. I go, okay, here's the test. All right, can I do this? Yesterday I failed. All right, my round impacted like 3/4 of an inch below the zone, right? The hit zone. And which, by the way, is the difference between like hitting him in the nose and like hitting him in the lip, right? Like, okay, I'll still take that.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the goal, but the objective is, we got to be careful about trying to make drills or trying to draw realistic conclusions from those. That like it doesn't cross over exactly, right? Like it's not a perfect comparison. It shouldn't necessarily even be that. It's just simply a drill. And the test in that case is 3x5 card, 15 yards, under 3 seconds from the draw. I either hit it or I don't. That's a pass fail. It's either all points or 0 points. It's either a hit factor of 100 or 0, right? You see what I'm getting at? All right, so that'd be another way of measuring points. And then of course we have some other options as far as like USPSA targets or IDPA targets and that kind of thing, where, well, this zone is 5 points, this one's 3 points, this one's 1 point, that kind of thing, right? Where it's more larger generic hit areas, and then it progressively gets worse from there. So my point is like whatever you're shooting, most shooters shoot and they go, okay, I either hit or I didn't hit, or I got these points, or look at this group, that group's pretty good, whatever. But can you calculate hit factor if you don't have a time component to put with it?
Yeah, you can't.
You
really can't. It's all subjective.
It's irrelevant, right? Mm-hmm. Because what hitting a target, and I see this sometimes in like Facebook groups, like somebody posts up their targets. I was at the range today, check out my target, right? It's like, okay, cool. And like you see some targets from some shooters that look like they shot it with double-aught buckshot from 10 yards, holes 10 yards is really not that far. Depends, I guess, on your patterning of your particular shotgun. But, it looks like they just shot this target with buckshot all over. And then you see some photos posted from shooters and you see a really nice group or some, pretty decent shooting. And it's like the variables in those two situations between those two shooters could be very similar. I was shooting this at 7 yards, right? I fired 10 shots. Here's my results, right? But one is significantly different than the other, right? Well, so what's the difference there? Now, obviously, there's some skill difference, but ignoring that, assuming you have two shooters that are of similar skill levels and you have two very different results on target, well, a lot of times the factor's got to be time, right? And that's relevant, right? Well, a shooter posts up a target. I feel like I'm kind of struggling. Like, my group's I missed some shots. I didn't hit this area I was trying to hit, whatever it is, right? I didn't hit my target. And it's like, well, you posted a target. How fast were your shots, right? Because you might have a shooter trying to shoot 20 splits, right? And those shots are spreading out. Or meanwhile, you have the dude posting the 7-yard target that looks like one hole. Well, I took 2 minutes to fire those 10 shots.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm getting at? So time is and we start talking about an actual real life shooting gunfight. Time is very relevant. There's no specific part time. It is solve problem as soon as I can, period. The sooner, the better.
Yeah. I mean, there is a part-time. We just don't know what it is, right? Because the part-time's either you are ended, the fight ends with you losing, or the fight ends with them losing. I mean, there is a start and a stop. And while, we can talk about surreptitious draws or drawing when there's a moment of opportunity, once that gun comes out, that's like the beep, right? Like, so whether it's I'm responding with a draw to a threat, or I'm using a surreptitious draw or waiting for a moment of opportunity to draw, once the gun comes out, there's a part time when that gunfight's going to be ended one way or another. And we just don't know what it is, but we can give ourselves the best chance of surviving if we dictate a little bit more on our side of getting hits, getting our hit factor and getting those hits quickly, even if it's a surreptitious draw, quick shots are starting to impact, because even a surreptitious draw, I mean, you start drawing slowly, you bring attention yourself. If that, so I mean, I don't mean to belabor the point, but yeah, so a time element is crucial, even though we don't know part times. Beforehand.
So let me throw out some kind of other just interesting things to consider regarding this. So let's imagine let's make up a make-believe gunfight, an example of one. And so you've got bad guy and you, right? Bad guy draws his gun, you draw your gun, right? And let's say you fire 5 shots in 1.8 seconds, which is a pretty good clip, right? But you're going so fast, you're out shooting your skill level, and you're kind of more relying on like point shooting. And 4 out of the 5 shots miss or don't really hit very effective areas on the body. Meanwhile, your bad guy takes 3 seconds to fire 5 shots, but all of them hit in your chest. Who wins?
Yeah, I mean, I would say obviously effective hits are always gonna. I don't want to say always, because we're dealing with the randomness of life, but you have a much higher probability of ending that fight with effective hits rather than somebody getting shot in the arm and ending the fight that way. So the hits that are counting, so to speak, the A zone hits, if you want to. You combine the two terms. Those are going to dictate the fight.
Now I recognize my example I gave is not a perfect example, and it doesn't paint the whole picture, right? Because I mean, for instance, now on the simplistic level, assuming making just very broad assumptions, even if the bad guy took a little bit longer time, but got far more hits on target than you did, shooting very fast but having more misses, chances are bad guy wins, right? But what reality throws at us is that, well, you might have missed 4 out of 5 times, but that one hit that came on your second shot went right in the exact right place that it needed to, heart, head, whatever, right? In that second shot, instead of, it occurred at 1.2 seconds or whatever, but then you fired, so many other shots after that, and and they were not effective, or they missed or whatever. But then you recognize, oh, bad guy's going down. Okay, so I stopped shooting, right? So you see what I'm getting at? Like, only one of those shots has to really count in some circumstances. And so And even if the bad guy fired 5 shots, but took 3 seconds, but his first shot connected perfectly, well, you see what I'm getting at? So real life is not as simple as such a simplistic example, but what I'm trying to get at is a miss for us in practical terms in a gunfight equates to, well, that one missed. Now I got to shoot again, which is more time.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't do something, if I don't correct something somewhere along the way, like if I miss, and if I don't fix that, there's a good chance I just keep missing, or I miss at a high percentage, right? And you see, so that just is going to prolong things. Well, now it's just more shots, more time before I can actually solve the problem. And this is why it's important to have a high standard of accuracy and a high standard, or really a low standard in terms of like the numerical value of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to get as many good hits on target, and good enough hits, effective hits, adequate hits, appropriate hits for based on the target, right? If I can put everything in a 6-inch, like a grapefruit size, that's a pretty good size grapefruit, but in a grapefruit sized area in the high center chest, those are effective hits. If I can put them between the eyes and the nose and that triangular area that intersects there on the face, that's probably going to get it done with one shot, even in a lot of cases. So that is what would be considered high hit factor shooting, unless it takes you so much time to do that you can't get it done. Like you're going up against Max Michel, right? Mm-hmm. Tell you what, I can probably shoot as accurately as Max Michel if there's no time restraint, right? I just shot a 1.25 or 1.35 inch group, something like that. I didn't actually measure it, but it was a very tight group at 25 yards yesterday with my competition pistol. But that was an untimed, I was literally just trying to confirm sight in for my red dot. No time restraint. I can shoot really great group. It's one of the better groups I've shot with that particular gun at that distance. But I'll bet Max Michel can do it faster than me. See what I'm getting at? So this is where there should be this desire within us to constantly improve, right? To get more accurate, right? Because there should be some base level of accuracy. Like, so I'll tell you what, if you can shoot a dot torture drill at 3 yards with a 47, 48 points or higher score, you probably have the skill as far as accuracy is concerned to make any shot that you need to make in a defensive situation, right? Because you look at this little 2-inch circle at 3 yards, right? And so, let's say that 3 yards is a little bit less than half of 7 yards. 7 yards is a very common distance that people use in shooting, 21 feet, right? Well, that's about a 4-inch circle at 7 yards. It's about a 6-inch circle at 10 yards, give or take, right? Well, could we have a shot beyond that? Sure, right? So if we could shoot better than that, that's even better. But my point is that most shooting problems, accuracy-wise, can easily be solved with the level of accuracy it takes to shoot 2-inch circles at 3 yards with no time restraint, right? I'm just talking about accuracy here. If you can do that, then you have technically the capacity within you to shoot accurately enough for what's required in most situations. Mm-hmm. So the only other major contributing factor then is how quickly you can do it, right? So here's my point. I was working with a shooter not too long ago, and we did the dot torture drill, and he got done shooting that. And I said, look, you have just demonstrated, because he had some kind of, I think, some insecurities of what he was capable of doing, particularly accuracy wise. He was really intimidated by dot torture. He's just like, whoa, like that, whoa, it's just, it was kind of overwhelming to him. And what did I tell him? I said, focus on the process. How do you hit this 2-inch circle at 3 yards? How? You put the gun on that dot, you don't move it, and you press the trigger. If you do that, it will go there every single time. That's the process. Now, there's a lot of stuff in the details, to accomplishing that, but as far as the process. But that, if we break the process down into simple bite-sized chunks, it's put gun on target, hold it there, press trigger, and don't move it from there, right? That's the process. That's it. And here's the thing. You had a shooter who was so focused on this little small target for me. In his perception, in his worldview, that's a small target for me, even at 3 yards. He kind of felt like he couldn't hit it. Right? And he was so focused on the fact that I don't know that I can hit this, or he was afraid he was going to miss, that got in his way of the process, or it would have. But because of the way I taught him, we made sure we focused on the process part of things. I said, look, you know what you got to do. So all you got to do is these 3 things. Get the gun on target, hold it there, press trigger. And there was a couple times throughout shooting that dot torture drill, he was like, oh boy, that shot got really close. So he's looking at the results, and I just kept reminding him, hey man, just focus on the process. Mm-hmm. You've done it up to this point 30 other times. Like, I don't think he had his first miss until he'd probably fired 30 shots. You've just proven for 30 times you can do this. Go back to what you did. Don't worry about that result. Mm-hmm. I have misses too. Happens more often than I'd like, right? I have misses. Big deal. You fix it. And the way you fix it, you don't fix things by looking at the holes on the target. We can use the holes on target to be a gauge, like, okay, well, clearly something didn't work, but that's just, all that should be is a cue to go back to the process of firing a gun, firing a shot. That's where the real work occurs.
I would, as you were going through that and you kind of explained, if you possess the skills, you're using the dot torture at 3 yards, those skills are adequate enough or show enough proficiency to make hits at, like how you said, 5 and 7 yards. I think the issue is, and I would correlate that, or I would use the analogy like that and compare it to a timer, right? Like, mm-hmm. If you don't know the times, then you don't know what you're capable of, right? So if you don't know that you can run this dot torture, if you never run the dot torture, you don't know that you're capable. Those skills are going to be transferable. Similarly, if you never timed yourself, you don't know what your times are. And I think that the issue is with timing, with times, is that you said focus on the process, right? And that requires like a methodical approach mostly, right? Like you break it down into steps and you learn the right technique in a building pattern, right? So then you come out and you have a good draw. So you break it down into steps. With time, I think it's difficult to tell people we still have to build the process. Like the time will come. Like you see somebody with a 1 second draw, you're not going to be able to get that like the first day that you're out drawing. Mm-hmm. And so don't be discouraged when you have a 3 second draw time. Like that doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means we need to methodically move from 3 seconds down to 2.5, down to 2. And so I think it's different. It's a different approach because there's all this tension to not break it down step by step because there's this time element, right? And I think that's I as you were saying, that kind of played in my mind is that, it is how we go about learning things can sometimes be a roadblock. And when you put a time element, it always kind of makes people, or I don't want to say always, but the tendency is to cut corners or cut the process. And you said it's extremely important in coming out with a good result is to learn something through a process. So the time element gives you some of that kind of stress, but it also kind of at that same time, that stress kind of makes you, hey, I'm just going to do this because I want to be fast. But
Yep.
I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe I
It absolutely does.
went too
Everything
far
you
out of
said
the
makes
tangent.
sense. Everything you said makes sense. And here's the thing. So I was talking, a moment ago, I was mostly talking about the accuracy standard portion of it. The point being there, the point I'm trying to make is that many of you listening or watching the podcast today can probably, you can probably consistently, let's say if you can stand there and put 5 rounds on demand into a 2-inch circle at 3 yards, then you have the technical accuracy potential. Like you can shoot accurately well enough to do anything that I would require of you in my classes. Okay. And so then we start looking at the time side of the equation, like what you're talking about here, Matthew. Time and accuracy are 2 different things.
Mm-hmm.
They are, and they kind of they work against each other pretty much, right? They're very. I mean, it comes down to decreasing the amount of time that we perform a certain task within makes it a little more difficult to perform that task. Some of that is just straight up, that's the way it works. Some of it is actually self-imposed, as far as letting the stress of that get to us. So that's actually what happens to a lot of people. If they've never used a shot timer before, the first time they are asked to shoot something under, while being recorded by a shot timer, it's a pretty stressful event for them because they're thinking more about the timer than they are actually about just the process of getting the job done, right? So the brain goes from focusing on what I got to do to I'm worried now if I can get it done in the time or not. Don't worry about that. Worry about what you can do, and you will perform at a subconscious level. At the level that you have subconsciously achieved, and it'll happen as fast as you are capable of doing it. It will. The thing is that there's a big difference between shooters as far as what they've like really truly mastered and ingrained within themselves subconsciously, right? I'm at a point now where less and less and less I think about really aiming the gun. Actually, I would say that most of the time I don't really think about aiming the gun so much. It's occurring more on a subconscious level. It's more about observing what's occurring in front of my face. See dot on target, press trigger, right? And I'm not like thinking like, oh, I got it. And actually, to be honest with you, more shooters probably shouldn't be thinking so hard about aiming, but many do.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a bit of a pitfall at times. Focusing more on just observing what's going on. Because I'll tell you what, our bodies are amazing. I mean, does anybody think about what they're doing with the computer mouse when they're navigating across a computer screen with the mouse? You don't think about it at all, do you? You think, I need to press that link. I want to see this photo my friend posted on Facebook. And you either just tap with your finger or you move your computer mouse over and you move to where your eye is looking. It happens naturally. Mm-hmm. Your gun will do the same thing if you let it. And so anyway, we will perform a certain skill as quickly as what we've essentially like. If you have not developed the speed side of it, it's hard to do things fast, really fast. And so I think that you have to work on accuracy and you have to work on speed separately. And so here's the thing, we put students in our classes, and of course they go through quite a bit of instruction, especially before we start really pushing them. And we'll put a student at 3 yards, not very far away from a pretty good sized target. And we say, go as fast, once I've already evaluated that they're safe and that they know how to consistently draw safely, I'll say, get in front of that target, go as fast as you can, right? And they'll start drawing. And I'll be like, I know you can go faster. They're still thinking too much about, I'm trying to aim my shot onto the target. I don't want you to care about this shot. This is an easy shot. You can shoot this all day long at 3 yards. Bam. What I'm trying to encourage you to do is go fast, right? And after we spend a little bit of time with a student, I mean, Shayna was watching the podcast. Oh, maybe I saw her name pop up or not. Shayna was a student of ours out in Ohio. Matthew, you know her.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how fast she drew on that during that class we taught together?
I think she got down sub-second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did. 0.9 something.
Yeah.
Right. And what's the point of that drill? It's to, Shayna, you can do this. You can go faster.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But you don't know how to really do that. And you also don't know what it feels like until you actually do it. And that's the whole reason why we do that, just learning how to draw fast from a very close distance, because the accuracy is irrelevant. We're just trying to teach how to draw fast, right? So now when we start bringing accuracy back into the picture, then we take Shayna and we put her at 7 yards and say, Shayna, I want you to draw with the same level of speed that as you did from 3 yards, because now you're going to do a build drill at 7 yards, right? Well, you'll be more successful at build drill if you draw with the same speed you just did at 3 yards. But then once you get up there, you're not going to just slam through the trigger like you did at 3 yards, right? But you're going to get out there fast. It gives you lots of time to do what? See and find the sights or your dot or whatever it is that you aim with, and get that little bit of a reference on target, and then bang, 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 bang 6 times for a build drill. Right. But it's interesting. I mean, I'm pretty sure you've seen this and that you agree, Matthew, that you take a student and once they start getting the idea of speed, they'll draw very fast at 3 yards, but then you stick them back at 15, and how fast do they draw?
Yeah. It happens
to
me
too. Down, right?
Yeah, because you're trying to be more deliberate and you're thinking about, okay, it's going to take me a little bit more time on my sights, so you do everything a little bit more slowly.
That's exactly right. But the draw itself is irrelevant to the shot that's going to be fired.
Right.
Right. You can still do that draw itself. You can do the draw itself as fast as you want. But then you can take that little bit extra time, let those sights settle, find things on top of the target, bang. Right. Okay. So why, what am I trying to get across with this? It's all process oriented. It's all process oriented. The draw should happen as fast as we can do it every time we come out of the holster. Every time. Right? The sights tell us, we look, we aim the gun and we go, ooh, that target's kind of small, indicating it's probably further away. I need to take a little bit more time with that. So then I use a little bit different trigger press, a little bit slower, a little bit smoother, perhaps, right? Being a little bit more sensitive with that trigger. In other words, the cadence and the speed at which we shoot should be dictated by what we see. And what we see is more relevant when we have more time to see. So we should do things sooner and not always necessarily faster, meaning that by drawing the gun and getting it up on target sooner gives us more time in the grand scheme of things to find the sights and see. And that then dictates hopefully a little bit smoother, better trigger press. And that is the difference maker between a less skilled shooter, like a new student that's coming through one of my classes for the first time, and then when I demonstrate the same thing, and they go, "Whoa, I could never do that." Oh, you can. You got to put in some work, but like it kind of feels like it's this impossible thing to do. Like I can't even imagine doing what you just did. Well, practice, work, and I'm just doing things sooner in most cases so that I can actually then perform, and then what we look at is we see good hit results in a very, very short amount of time. That's what that leads to. And that's all process oriented. So again, the key here is that we're talking about hits on target. Hits on target give you information. I either hit or I didn't, or gives you certain point value. The timer gives you a time. That's also valuable data, and it's relevant. What's the time frame that this hit occurred within? Okay, all right. But if we focus on that hit, like if we're thinking ahead, like we're thinking this, usually it's not so much. Most of us don't think in terms of positive affirmation type thoughts, Matthew, when we're shooting. We mostly
Correct.
think in terms of I'm scared of missing.
And you
And
focus
I'm
on your
afraid I
missing.
can't do it in this time that I'd like to, that I won't be as fast as I want to be. We think negatively far more than we do positively. And actually the beautiful thing is the positive thought should just be focused on, I know what I got to do. I draw a gun, I bring it up here, I put it on the target, I don't move it, and I press trigger. And if I do that every time, then every time those rounds go where I want them to go.
Yeah, no, I agree completely, and I think, you know, in a lot of other disciplines, people learn things by process, and unfortunately, I think with shooting, sometimes it's like the process goes out, and we just want the results, and we want to do them quickly, and so it becomes overwhelming especially if you're trying to learn, you know, if you're switching over from maybe I'm just a plinker, you know, that's all I've really ever done, to now I'm trying to do things quickly and accurately. And it's just like a complete different process, a different way of shooting the gun. And, you know, I think when you were talking about doing things sooner rather than faster, it's a really powerful thing. Because think about, like, if you guys are struggling with, you know, what's the difference between sooner versus faster, think about efficiency. Like, think about a process. If you're slow and you draw the gun, you work on your grip, you bring the gun up, you point it at the target, you look at the sights, you get your sights, you put your trigger finger on the trigger, you squeeze the trigger. That all takes time. But when you start doing things more efficiently, you're doing multiple things at once. So I'm drawing the gun, I'm bringing it up as I'm extending the gun, I'm picking up my sights, I'm starting my trigger squeeze. And so by the time I get out here, my sights are aligned, my trigger's already prepped, and I'm just squeezing the trigger. So it looks like, you know, I might be moving faster, and I may be moving faster than somebody, but I'm not actually moving maybe faster than, if I have a 1 second draw, I might not be technically moving any faster than somebody who has a 2 second draw. I might just be being more efficient with my movement. So the shot breaks sooner rather than faster.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah. No, dude, it absolutely does. Here's the thing. When we plant the subconscious seed, and that happens when we reinforce it consciously, obviously, when we are thinking about going fast, everything falls apart. When we instead focus on something related to the process, then that speed will come automatically. As far as I gotta clarify a little bit, right? We have to practice speed. We have to practice doing things, the manipulations like drawing the gun, doing a reload, you know, those kind of things. We got to practice those and learn how to do those at speed for them to happen fast. We have to practice moving with a gun in our hand quickly if we're incorporating movement into our shooting at all. That all has to be practiced first. That's not going to just come automatically. But what I'm trying to get at is, if we have that base level of I can draw pretty quick, I can, you know, do this manipulation, whatever, this thing, reload, blah blah blah, move from here to point A to point B pretty quickly. Once you have that base level of skill, then you start thinking about trying to go fast. You're gonna bungle everything up. But when I think instead of in terms of, I want to see my sight, whatever my optical aiming device is, whatever frame of reference I'm using. Again, I've talked about this before in the podcast. On close targets, I'm not really. It's a little bit different with a red dot, but in the case of iron sights, I'm looking for outline on my gun on target. I'm looking for front sight, hard focus, high equal light on the target at 3 yards, 5 yards, even sometimes, depending on, you know, how generous the target is. I'm looking frame of reference, gun. I see outline, gun on target, press trigger, bang bang. Right. So just to clarify that, but when I shift my thinking to, I want to see my sights. Just think of that term very broadly, as I just described a little bit. I want to see my sights on that target as soon as I can. And I have that mental picture even in my mind. I want to see my sights on target as soon as I can. That's different than thinking, I'm just going to do all this stuff fast.
Mhm.
Well, you'll do everything fast and you'll miss a lot. But if you change it to something related to the process, I want to see my sight on there as soon as possible. That's related to the process. If my sights are on target, right? And I'm holding steady, right? Sights are on target. I'm watching those sights on target, and I press trigger. Where's the bullet going? In that target. And by thinking, and that's kind of like what I've started to develop within myself, is I sort of have like this hunger to see my sights on target as soon as I can. And that subconsciously helps everything else support that objective at my already developed subconscious skill. So everything else happens as fast as it naturally can for me. That is a very powerful way of thinking about shooting. I want to see what I need to see as it relates to aiming my gun on target as soon as I possibly can. And then everything else will support that action.
Yeah. Agree.
And that is focusing on processes as opposed to results. Back to gunfight hit factor. If you do these things we've talked about today on the podcast, your hit factor will, I guarantee, it will increase. And that's a good thing in case you need to use those skills in a gunfight.
Absolutely. And I think it's important. I'll just kind of my last little statement before we close it up would be to, go back to that thought process that I used to have, and some people still may have, about separating completely the shooting sports and the self-defense completely, and that they have no applicability towards one another. But the matches, yes, what the stage is going to be, and everybody runs the same stage. And so the person with the best hit factor wins. In a gunfight, you are not running the same stage as the other person. They may be behind cover and you're not, or they may have the gun out and you don't. So you're not running the same stage, but the goal of getting your hit factor is the same for both of you. And so, give yourself the best opportunity. Unless you're in a, OK Corral type draw, you take 3 steps, turn around and draw, right? Like then everything's the same. But if not, you're trying to get your hit factor, accurate hits, effective hits on target as quickly as you can, preferably quicker than the other guy. Because if you both get hits on each other and they're effective, guess what? You may lose anyways. Right. I mean, they may lose and you may lose, and we're talking about life. Right. So it's not always a zero, a zero sum. I win, you lose, you win, I lose. It might be we both lose because we were both quick and both got effective. So the quicker you can stop that threat, really important.
Yep. Good ending thoughts. I did want to just say really quick to address a question from Crystal. And I know that you've been chatting with her in the comments as well, Matthew, but she says she's taking her CWP, Concealed Weapon Permit class this weekend. Any tips? Crystal, there's a lot that we could probably offer, but I'll keep this really brief and simple. Go in with an open mind, be ready and willing to learn, question everything, okay? Both in terms of, it's good to ask good questions, but also come away from the class and go, I need to think about this, and also maybe compare that to other things that you learn and study, because I'll just say they're, concealed carry instructors, I don't know who you got. They're a dime a dozen, and some are great and some are less great. And then finally, go in before your class. So make a decision today, tomorrow, whatever you got to do. Make a decision before you take this class to schedule your next class, actual training course, like more in-depth shooting oriented course. So set the goal or actually schedule the class before you go to your concealed carry class. And that, I think, will set you on a great path to success as you are beginning your journey. Well, it's time to wrap it up. Matthew, man, I don't know about you, and I probably talked too much because this was like a passionate topic, discussion for me here today, but I
No,
enjoyed it.
no. I mean, obviously, you do a good job of conveying, the importance of the process, and I think that takes time to explain why it's so important. So there's a process in explaining it, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. And yes, so the process is what will lead you to that increased hit factor. And our goal at concealedcarry.com is to see those hit factors. Those, if heaven forbid any one of you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to draw or use a gun, I truly, sincerely hope you are prepared for that day. And we work hard to help you get there. So thanks for being here and for watching or listening to the Concealed Carry podcast. Again, our sponsors today, Mantis X. Guys, use the coupon code CCP10 to save 10% off of either your next Mantis X3 or X10. Great product for training and getting some good, valuable feedback data on your shooting process, I might add. And that's how I would actually focus on it and that's a lot of what the data from the Mantis X is giving. That's why I like it so much, is it's process oriented, shows the movement of the gun, shows what's happening when you're pressing the trigger, shows these things going on as part of making the shot. I think some people use the Mantis X, Matthew, and they're like, but it doesn't show me really where my hits go. That's irrelevant. It's showing your process, right? You can look at your target and see where your hits would go.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
Now it's tougher when it's dry firing, but dry fire is irrelevant for where those hits go, really, if you think about it, especially as it relates to using Mantis X. It's telling you, it's giving the data related to the process and helping you learn that process better. So guys, check out Mantis X, mantisx.com, use coupon code CCP10. And then the Concealed Carry Gun Tools app, and specifically featuring today the Reciprocity Map Builder tool. Guys, download the app today, concealedcarry.com/mobile app. And that's a wrap. Brings us to the end. Matthew, time to bid you adieu.
Thank you, sir. Love you guys.
Same to you, brother. Guys, take care out there. Be safe and train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care. Boom.
And we had no giveaway that we forgot to do, so we're good.
Yeah, well, we used to do the Facebook Live giveaway, and kind of has quietly gone away. Maybe it should come back at some point.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think the people are good with Tuesdays. I don't know.
Guys, don't forget to sign up. concealedcarry.com/podcast prize.
Let's do it.
All righty. Well, we're going to sign on out of here. You all have a great weekend. Maybe hit the range, get some practice in, take a class, schedule your next class, do some dry fire, do whatever you got to do, make yourself a little bit better each day.